My name is Lily Roberts, and if you had asked me a few years ago about my life, I would have told you it was a story of success and happiness. Now, as I sit here looking back, I realize it was more a tale of deceit and betrayal. It all started with the best intentions, but somewhere along the way, things went terribly wrong. I was 34 years old, working as a financial analyst at an investment firm in Austin, Texas. I was ambitious and dedicated to my job, always striving to do my best. My hard work paid off when I was promoted to senior manager. My life seemed to be on a perfect trajectory. I was living in a beautiful suburban home with my husband, Matt, who was 35 and working as a software developer. Matt and I had met at work. I had been assigned to train him when he joined the firm. Despite being younger, I held a higher position, which might have seemed intimidating to some, but Matt was always respectful and eager to learn. We quickly grew close, spending our lunch breaks together and talking about everything under the sun. Our connection deepened, and before long, we were inseparable. We married within 2 years, believing our love would carry us through anything. Our first few years of marriage were filled with joy. We enjoyed our new home, hosted gatherings with friends, and dreamed of the future. But as time went on, cracks began to appear. Matt's career was not advancing as he had hoped. He was frustrated with his job, feeling overshadowed and unappreciated. I, on the other hand, was thriving. My promotions and accolades at work were becoming more frequent, and my success only seemed to highlight Matt's struggles. I noticed a shift in Matt's attitude. He started coming home late more often, his phone constantly buzzing with messages he was quick to hide. At first, I chalked it up to work stress. But as weeks went by, his behavior became more erratic. He was always secretive about his plans and frequently mentioned his sister, Hannah, who had moved to Austin not long before. Hannah was in her early 30s and was, to put it mildly, a piece of work. She had a commanding presence and a knack for getting what she wanted. Her arrival in our lives was marked by an unusual intensity. She began making frequent demands on Matt, asking for money under various pretexts, which Matt was always eager to provide. I initially tried to be accommodating, wanting to be supportive of Matt's family. However, it soon became clear that Hannah was not just a casual visitor. She was manipulative and assertive, often showing up unannounced and making demands that left me feeling uncomfortable. I remember one evening when she dropped by and demanded $10,000 to help with a business venture. Matt handed over the money without consulting me, which infuriated me. I had never been averse to helping family, but this seemed excessive and sudden. Despite my growing concerns, I chose to document each transaction meticulously. I knew that having a clear record might be important if things ever went south. I started keeping a detailed log of the money given to Hannah, noting the dates and reasons she provided. It was a precautionary measure, something that seemed sensible given the growing tension in our home. As Matt's resentment towards my career success grew, he began pressuring me to consider leaving my job. He argued that my demanding position was affecting our marriage, but I suspected there was more to it. His frustration seemed more than just work-related. It was almost as if he was projecting his own insecurities onto me. One day, as I was preparing for a presentation, I overheard a conversation between Matt and Hannah. They were whispering, and I couldn't catch all the details, but the tone was unmistakably conspiratorial. It struck me that their relationship was more than just sibling support. It seemed like a full-blown alliance against me. By this time, I had been promoted to senior manager. It was a milestone I had worked hard for, and while I was thrilled, Matt's reaction was less than supportive. He grew distant and irritable. Hannah, ever the opportunist, began making more frequent demands for money, now citing personal emergencies and family issues. Her requests totaled over $60,000, and Matt's willingness to comply was becoming increasingly unsettling. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. Matt's new routine of coming home late, avoiding eye contact, and taking secretive phone calls became the norm. He was spending more time with Hannah, and their combined influence over him grew stronger. I was left to deal with a growing sense of betrayal and isolation. Despite all this, I tried to stay patient. I knew that confronting Matt too early could backfire. Instead, I prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation, all while trying to manage my work responsibilities and maintain a semblance of normalcy at home. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. As I navigated these choppy waters, I kept reminding myself that I needed to stay focused. I was determined to find out what was really going on and to protect myself from the growing storm that seemed to be brewing around me. I never imagined that life could unravel so quickly. The situation at home with Matt and Hannah was getting worse, and I was barely keeping it together. My work at the investment firm was becoming a refuge from the chaos at home, but the pressure was mounting on all fronts. As I continued to document the money Hannah was demanding and observe Matt's increasingly erratic behavior, I realized that something needed to change. One day, I received a call from my boss. The news was bittersweet. I was being promoted to senior manager. I was excited about the opportunity, but I also felt a heavy weight in my chest. Matt's resentment had been growing, and I knew that this new role might push him and Hannah further away. Matt's reaction to the promotion was exactly what I feared. He was cold and distant, barely congratulating me. Instead, he seemed more interested in how this would affect him. Hannah's response was even more unsettling. She showed up at our house the day after I announced the promotion and demanded $15,000 for what she claimed was a critical investment opportunity. The timing was too convenient, and I couldn't ignore the sense of dread creeping over me. I didn't have to wait long for the confrontation I had been preparing for. A week after the promotion, Matt came home in a particularly foul mood. He was more irritable than usual and snapped at me over the smallest things. That night, he finally exploded. "You don't get it, Lily," Matt shouted. "Your job is the reason we're falling apart. You're never around, and Hannah and I are left to deal with everything on our own." I was taken aback. I had tried to be understanding, balancing my career with my responsibilities at home. But Matt's outburst was more than just frustration. It was a culmination of all the resentment he had been harboring. I knew Hannah had a hand in this. She had been fueling Matt's dissatisfaction with my success. Things reached a breaking point when I discovered that Matt and Hannah were planning a secret trip. They were always looking for excuses to be together, and their actions were becoming more suspicious. I decided to follow Matt one evening, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was really going on. I tailed him to a cafe on the outskirts of town where he met Hannah. I couldn't hear their conversation clearly, but I saw them exchanging what looked like a stack of money. My heart sank as I realized that they were up to something. The evidence of their betrayal was piling up, and I knew I had to act. My first move was to check the security footage from our home. To my dismay, I saw Matt and Hannah sneaking around, rifling through our belongings. They were looking for something specific, but I couldn't figure out what. Their behavior was increasingly brazen, and I felt a growing sense of urgency. I decided it was time to make a strategic move. I confronted Matt the next day, but he was defensive and evasive. I told him that I knew about the money and the secret meetings with Hannah. He denied everything and accused me of not trusting him. It was clear that his loyalty was with his sister, not with me. Despite his denials, I knew I needed to protect myself. I started preparing for the worst, gathering all the evidence I could find, documents, emails, and notes. I also began consulting with a lawyer to understand my options and to plan for any legal battles that might arise. The real turning point came when Matt and Hannah made their move. They had planned a lavish getaway, using my credit card information to fund it. I had suspected something was amiss, so I decided to take a preemptive measure. I swapped my credit card with an old membership card from a local fitness club. When Matt and Hannah tried to use the card for their trip, their plans were thwarted. They ended up stranded in Minneapolis during a harsh winter. I had hoped this would be a wake-up call for Matt, but it only seemed to escalate the situation. During their trip, I received a call from Chris, Hannah's husband. He was shocked by the developments and revealed that he had been unhappy in his marriage as well. Chris had become an unlikely ally, and together, we began to strategize our next steps. I was ready to face Matt and Hannah, but I knew I had to be careful. The groundwork had been laid, and I was prepared for the confrontation that would change everything. My patience and meticulous planning were about to pay off, but the real challenge was just beginning. I remember the day Matt and Hannah came back from their disastrous trip like it was yesterday. They walked through the front door, their faces etched with frustration and defeat. The once familiar look of triumph in their eyes had been replaced with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. I had been waiting for this moment, my heart pounding with both anticipation and dread. Matt was the first to speak. Lily, he began, but the words seemed to get stuck in his throat. I could see the wheels turning in his mind as he tried to come up with an excuse. He glanced at Hannah, who was trying to regain her composure, but her nervous fidgeting betrayed her. "I've had enough of your lies and deceit," I interrupted, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "I know all about the credit card and your plans. I've been documenting everything, and I have all the evidence I need." Matt's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" he stammered. Hannah, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly snapped. "You have no idea what you're talking about. We've been through enough already. You don't need to make things worse." I took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment I had prepared for. "I know you were planning to use my credit card for that trip, and I've already replaced it with an old membership card. You ended up stranded because of that. And I've also been in touch with Chris." At the mention of Chris, Hannah's face contorted with a mix of anger and fear. "Chris?" she demanded. "What's he got to do with this?" "Chris and I have been talking," I said calmly. "He's been struggling with the same issues, and he's seen what you've done. He's ready to stand with me against both of you." Matt and Hannah exchanged a look of panic. "You're going too far, Lily," Matt said, trying to regain his composure. "This is all just a misunderstanding. We can work this out." I shook my head. "No, Matt. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is betrayal, and I'm done with it. I've already consulted with my lawyer, and I'm ready to file for divorce. I'm also demanding repayment of the $60,000 you borrowed and compensation for the emotional damage you've caused." The silence that followed was heavy. Matt's eyes were filled with disbelief, while Hannah looked like she was about to crumble. "You can't be serious," Hannah said, her voice trembling. "You wouldn't really do this." "I've never been more serious," I replied. "You've made it clear that you have no respect for me or my boundaries. I'm done being manipulated and deceived. I'm taking control of my life." Matt finally broke down, his facade cracking. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for things to get this bad." "But you did let it get this bad," I said firmly. "And now there are consequences." The confrontation wasn't just a turning point, it was a cathartic release. The weight of the deceit, the anger, and the hurt that had been building up inside me was finally being addressed. I was taking a stand, and it felt empowering. As Matt and Hannah processed what was happening, I could see the realization dawning on them. They were trapped, with their schemes exposed and their plans falling apart. Matt's attempts to apologize and explain seemed futile against the overwhelming evidence I had gathered. Later that day, I met with Chris. He had been a surprising ally in all this, and his support meant a lot. We discussed the next steps and agreed that our focus should be on making sure the legal proceedings were handled thoroughly. Chris was also preparing to confront Hannah, and the prospect of both of us moving forward without the weight of deceit was a small comfort. The legal paperwork was prepared, and I felt a sense of resolve as I signed the divorce papers. I was reclaiming my independence, and with each step I took, I felt stronger. The confrontation with Matt and Hannah was not just about ending a relationship, it was about reclaiming my life and moving toward a future where I was no longer a victim of deceit and manipulation. But even as I took these steps, the situation wasn't fully resolved. There were still challenges ahead, and I knew that the path to moving on would be fraught with complications. The road to independence was long, but I was ready to face whatever came next with the strength and determination that had carried me this far. The weeks following the confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. The divorce papers were filed, and every day seemed to bring a new challenge. Matt and Hannah fought back, but their efforts were futile against the mountain of evidence I had gathered. The court process was grueling, but I was determined to see it through to the end. One crisp morning, I sat in my new apartment, the one I had bought with the money from the settlement. It was a sleek, modern condo in downtown Austin, and I felt a surge of pride as I looked around. It was a symbol of my newfound independence and the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Chris had been a steady support throughout this period. His own separation from Hannah had been painful, but he was handling it with grace. We had become close, finding solace in each other's company and mutual understanding. Our shared experiences had forged a bond between us that was more than just friendship. He had been instrumental in ensuring the legal process went smoothly and had been a beacon of support when I needed it most. As I settled into my new condo, the final court hearing approached. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but I knew that this was the last hurdle to overcome. On the day of the hearing, I walked into the courtroom with a sense of resolve. I was ready to close this chapter and start afresh. The courtroom was tense, filled with the echoes of legal jargon and the hushed whispers of spectators. Matt and Hannah were present, their faces a mix of anxiety and resentment. I could feel their eyes on me, but I focused on the judge and the proceedings. The hearing went as expected. The judge reviewed the evidence, listened to the arguments, and made a ruling. I was granted the divorce, and Matt was ordered to repay the $60,000 along with additional compensation for emotional damages. It was a relief to hear those words, but it was also a validation of everything I had fought for. As I walked out of the courtroom, a sense of closure washed over me. I had faced the deceit and manipulation head-on, and I had emerged victorious. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led me to a place of strength and self-assurance. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed energy. My promotion to regional director was officially announced, and I embraced the new role with enthusiasm. It was everything I had worked for, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction as I stepped into my new position. Chris and I continued to support each other, and our friendship grew stronger. We shared our victories and challenges, finding comfort in knowing we were not alone in our struggles. There was an unspoken understanding between us, a recognition of the battles we had fought and the strength we had gained. The finality of the divorce and the resolution of the financial matters were freeing. I was no longer tied to the deceit and manipulation of my past. The weight that had burdened me for so long was lifted, and I felt like I could finally breathe. As I looked out over the city from my new condo, I reflected on how far I had come. The journey had been fraught with difficulties, but it had also been a path of personal growth and empowerment. I had faced betrayal and deceit, and I had emerged stronger and more self-assured. My life was no longer defined by the manipulations of others. I had reclaimed my independence and found a new beginning. The future was bright, filled with opportunities and the promise of new experiences. I was ready to embrace whatever came next with the confidence and strength that had carried me through this transformative period. In the end, the story of my life was one of resilience and empowerment. I had faced deceit and manipulation head on and had triumphed. It was a testament to the strength that comes from standing up against betrayal and the power of reclaiming one's life and future.